Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we enter the month of March, I'm reminded of the first steps and people may be taking on any situation. The feeling can feel heavy, especially if you're starting over. It's one thing to let things go. It's another thing to take a step forward in a direction that you're not used to. There's a one quote from Rosa Parks, notable in February for Black History Month, but she says it this way: I've learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. So it kind of reminds us that sometimes the biggest hurdle is ourselves. So today, to speak a little deeper on this, is a new guest. His name is Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us and just being part of the conversation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me on.
No worries. I just want to give a little disclaimer. Those who are in the States, by the way, 90 Days of Suicide Crisis Lifeline. If you are struggling and you need help, it's the hardest thing for adults to actually do sometimes, to say, I need help. Those three words. So I do encourage you, find whatever that is. I don't like reinventing the wheel. If faith-based community is a thing that's positive, then do that. If it's not, then don't do it. Find something that you actually can be around people that you can ask those three words together. I need help, and get the help that you may need. Thank you again so much for joining the discussion. I always say people say it better than me, Kyle. So I don't like kind of making my own quote. So I kind of piggyback on others who are, I guess, well-spoken, wordsmith per se. Karl Barth says it this way: though no one can go back and make brand new starts, anyone can start from now and make brand new endings. What comes to mind when you hear this kind of idea?
It reminds me of what my grandfather said to me when I was much younger, which was decide your destiny. And, that kind of line that came when in one ear, went out the other at a young age. Mm-hmm. And, I rediscovered it many, many years later, and then had to work out, okay, what does decide your destiny mean? And going, this whole life that I create, every step that I take, every lesson that I learn, every perceivable failure or, weak moment, it all culminates into, all right, I've got this basket full of different things. Now what do I want to create with it? What do I want to what recipe do I want to put together? And I think that's what, having a destination, having an ending, having somewhere where you're going to get yourself on a certain track to go to, really helps you to bring clarity to your life.
Yeah, and a lot of times, working in mental health, I feel like a lot of times the focus is obviously on stability, sometimes social needs, sometimes it's also physical needs, taking care of someone's physical health. But one thing that doesn't get talked a lot about is sense of purpose, whatever that looks like. What does that look like? Because at the end of the day, you may get stable. The biggest challenge is what is next when it comes to mental health, when it comes to anything, when it comes to starting new. You can get pretty, one thing that I noticed, especially in crisis situation, if you're able to ask for help, sometimes you get stable. But then eventually you get to a point where you're asking this question that you're, the destiny question. What is my purpose? You could get stable. I'm not saying not to make light. Some situations are harder than others, but there's always going to be that what's next moment. What do I do next? And I find that what you're saying really kind of resonates with me. I'm going to ask you if you want to piggyback or say anything on that. And then I have a question about what has made you stay resilient in your life during hard times. But let's go with, do you have anything to add for what we've talked about so far or anything?
Yes. So what's next? I mean, that I think comes from really working out what are your big goals, what are some of the big things that you want to, and when I was younger, I had some major health challenges, which had me thinking about legacy and purpose and mission, and if I was going to go, and that whole memento mori, remember you will die, remember that you will fade, everything you touch will fade. So with that sort of, it's almost like that full stop, because we get we get, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it next week, or
Yeah.
when New Year's resolutions come around, I'll whip it all up together. I'll do that, and that kind of retreating from doing it now, doing what now, just piles on that anxiety, that anguish, and I think having something like for me, a lot of my younger years were spent thinking about my longevity, thinking about my health, thinking about going to specialist rooms and trying to work out like how many years can I get out of this and what procedure do I need to have next. And so it was constantly from the age of 18 just forced on me. And then we are, deep down, we're incredibly resilient and survive engineered like species. So I had to figure out a mindset that was going to help me. And one of the things that helps me, and I hope helps the listeners, is to have big dreams, legacy dreams that force you to live and take action today that will inspire you, because those sorts of actions that you take today, those sorts of things that you do today are leading you towards that big goal. And you knowing that, like each next step, each next move that I make, yes, it might be pretty small compared to my big goals, but they're taking me to a certain destination that I see as desirable and I see as worthy of my own legacy.
Yeah, a lot of times, we could be our own barriers. I say that we could be our own kind of ourselves to get in the way. A lot of times there's a concept of cognitive distortions. A lot of times these negative thoughts that ruminate, that become extreme, can kind of be in the way of thinking bigger. Well, we could talk ourselves out of anything. We could talk ourselves into anything. So it's kind of, the resilience is there. Sometimes we like to fit things in a little box. We want things to fit conveniently in a little box, but a lot of times I do, I feel sometimes we limit ourselves when it comes to what we think and what we can accomplish, and I don't think we sometimes understand that we only limit that from. I think sometimes that could be based on fear or urgency or other factors, but I do like the concept of always thinking bigger and the idea of when it comes to what we want to achieve, because I think that is. I don't know. I want you to tell me more about that later on, but I want to ask you. You mentioned resilience. What has made you stay resilient in your life during the hard times? You mentioned a little bit, kind of caveated on being fairly ill at age 18. What would you say? And also, what would you say with those who want to give up today, or just who are struggling, just are discouraged? Anything?
I think one of the hardest things is convincing yourself, when you're in those moments, like why keep going, why keep showing up, why keep taking that next step, and if you can delay the giving up, if you can push it back just a little bit, I don't know if it's godly, I don't know if it's divine intervention, I'm not sure if it's timing, but something will come into play that will give you reason to take that next step and that next step, and it creates momentum. So if you can just delay giving up, there's people out there that depend on you, and the good work that you do in your life, the good work that you show up with, will impact other people's lives. And so it's almost a duty to your fellow brothers and sisters as well to go out there with. And I think another thing that's helped me to stay resilient has been people that have poured things into my life, people that have gone, well, Kyle, you've got this, or, lift your head up, or those little moments, like my younger brother at one point he was 11 years old, and he gave me like a hug from behind, and at the time I was just crying in like this kind of spaghetti that turned into probably a soup by the time he came around, But that moment just shows you that pure, divine, caring heart that we all have in ourselves and in each other. So you can pull from any moments where people have shown you love, and just know that love is out there for you. Your place, your sense of belonging, your tribe. It is out there. It's just sometimes, like they used to pan for gold. Sometimes you really have to pan for gold. You really have to look for that right tribe and that right person, that right people. So, yeah, I'd say don't.
I remember as one of my guests said, we're talking about being brave and being courageous. He says, a brave person is a person who's brave 5 minutes longer. Basically, that's what it comes down to, because we're human. It's not, it is scary, and I wanted to touch a little bit, and then we're going to move forward about time. Especially I had guests on who are terminally ill for cancer, and one thing, World Cancer Day was the beginning of February. One thing he's a father. He has a daughter in the 20s, but what he realized real quick was from birth to 18, that's when you spend 80% of the time with your child, with your kid. So it kind of puts things in perspective of how you value and you manage your time. And I do feel sometimes it's a shame sometimes that we don't realize this sooner, that like our time matters, how we treat other people matter, and ourselves, of course. So
yeah.
I want to just piggyback and just saying, Alice Walker has a wonderful way of saying this. It says, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. How many times does this happen? Like a lot of times it's either or. We have this dualistic mind. Either I'm going to fail or I'm going to be successful, or there might be a third option. Sometimes we're not even thinking a little bit deeper or reflecting a little bit on the situation. What are your thoughts when you hear this quote?
Yeah, I think it's permission. We're all looking for that permission, can I be given permission to do this? Can I be given permission to start my own business? Can I be given permission to try and take this step into a new career? Can I be given permission? And you'll see sometimes people will ask, other people the most ridiculous questions. Like, I find myself doing it sometimes. I'll ask, can I just go to the bathroom? And then every now and then I've had people just look at me going, they go, no, you can't. Like as a joke, Yeah. It's like, what a ridiculous question. If you need to go to the toilet, excuse yourself and just state, I'm going to the bathroom. So I think that power is something very important, that we all assume more power, more authority over our own lives, our own life direction. Because if we want to help people, if we want to impact, if we want to decide our destiny, we need to have power. Imagine having to ask everywhere you go can I go to the toilet, rather than It's a silly example, but it just shows you how many ways and I think our upbringing is like that. I think you go back to where schools came from, the common school era, the factory lines, setting up for equipment to be used in war. So you had to put your hand up, you had to be in those lines, you had to listen attentively to the front. And when there's a good leader, there's no issues in listening. It's good to listen and follow and learn and take things away. But I think this is an area, if we have people that ask more questions, stand up a little bit more, go, hang on a minute, I don't really agree with the way that's going. I'm not too sure about the direction forward with that. I don't know how we can be more independent, sovereign beings when we decide this way. So I think if we can all take a note from Alice Walker's quote, I think we can all get better.
Yeah, and I also feel like just understanding your surroundings. We're not islands, so we may be susceptible to wanting to belong more than our own good. in the sense that we can't say no. Like you mentioned the bathroom, but like sometimes it's like, oh, can you help me move? Can you help me do this? And a lot of times you yourself have to set boundaries. It's okay to say no. I feel that one of the most humbling professions working in the mental health field for me is just how little I can do sometimes, how little resources I can do. But there's a power of presence, just being there. A lot of times, I don't need to tell someone who is going through cancer that I have an uncle that went through cancer. You know what I mean? It makes nothing. There's no sense.
Yeah.
It just, the fact of the matter is they just want to hear. They want you to hear them, because a lot of times they're not heard. And I feel a lot of times we dehumanize things that we don't understand. We dehumanize ourselves. We kind of unkind to ourselves. We're told to be nice. We don't know what that means. We don't know what it means to be nice. We're just nice because we're trying to avoid uncomfortableness, but we're not really kind of push. There's this what's it called? There's a healthy tension. That's okay. It's a healthy, there's healthy stress. Like, oh, this is stressful. But if you understand, the idea that this stuff may be stressful because I'm not used to it. It's not that it's necessarily bad. I want to ask you, what have you seen? Or that has helped you in being intentional and continue stepping forward? We're talking about stepping forward. I know this is kind of worded weirdly, but like, what has helped you stay intentional in staying that course, moving forward? Because it's one thing to focus on the big goals, but like those little micro goals each day, getting up, saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So what has helped to keep you motivated, per se?
Yeah, there's many things to keep motivated. Sometimes it's a chip on your shoulder. Sometimes it's what other people have said to you, those sorts of things. But I think a lot of the battles you'll fight is with yourself. And I think a good tip to stay intentional is to not wipe yourself out. If you said, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna be energetic, I'm gonna be singing the sound of music first thing out of bed, and I'm gonna be doing cartwheels, and if you get up and maybe you've got a bit of a headache and you don't necessarily feel like that, don't wipe yourself out and be miserable the entire day. Go, cool. I thought I was going to start from Sound of Music level. I'm starting here. Yeah. Great. Now it's my responsibility, and I've got a job. I've got a job to take some steps up and up and up. And one of the great ways that has helped me to stay intentional is really working out my values, working out what motivates me, working out what how I want to live. Now, I'm not saying no one can sit in an inclining chair or a declining chair, being pampered 24/7, and be happy. Maybe there's people out there that can be, but I feel like after a while, I start getting cramps. I start not enjoying it. I start feeling, hey, what am I doing to greater humanity? What sort of contribution am I adding? Gosh, I'm seeing all these problems in the world. Am I just there to just listen to someone's opinion poll on TV and just sit there and consume the problem and have it pent up in my chest until it forms a sickness? Or am I going to go out there and do something about it and see how can I put the world a little bit more in order? And I think that's something that, knowing that, hey, I'm fine to go on holiday, fine to do the manicure pamper, the pam sesh, that's fine. But I know that those things run out, and what kind of endures for me or comes into every day is, am I striving for my full potential? Am I trying to get better? Am I helping someone? Am I helping others? Because sometimes you're striving. Look, I've got the best shaped body, or I've got the best, business. But then you go, I just still feel a bit of an emptiness. And then you go, okay, maybe it's the contribution area. Maybe I'm not contributing. Maybe I can help a younger version of me, along their journey. Where, maybe I can have that. I could be that hand that I had. I had a hand up for my grandparents, and I was very lucky. Not everybody has that opportunity. Maybe I can help them, and those sorts of things help me remain intentional, because I know what I want to be doing and why I want to be doing them.
Yeah, I was, kind of thinking a little short story. I remember when I first got out of the military, I was in the U.S. Air Force during 9/11, and I remember going to a support group. I was like, and I said, I was so bitter. Rationally, it made sense, but I was wrong. Like at the same time, even though every argument in my mind that I reflect, I'm like, these people were just like, they're complaining about something. Like, I didn't have anyone during the time when I was struggling, when I was in the Air Force, but I was still wrong, because eventually it took me years later to find out that that's what I love to do. I love to kind of help people in that capacity. So sometimes, we kind of, like I said, talk ourselves into or out of things. And it's interesting because I feel the foundation of why we do things sometimes can kind of see how strong that foundation will be. And I think Nelson Mandela says it well. He says, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. So if we're making choices just based on fears, there's a sense of urgency and abruptness and reactionary kind of model that doesn't usually sustain well. So when you hear this quote, what usually comes to mind when you hear this quote for you?
I think a lot of life we are, guided by our fears. Like I do, like I got to get to school. I got to, I got to do the right thing. Otherwise, and I think a lot of our life we are guided by that. And sometimes that is positive, like it has a positive outcome. It's psychological. It's, hey, there's a saber-toothed tiger, I need to run. Hey,
exactly.
Those sorts of things. So it creates that urgency in action. However, that's very, it's not very conscientious. It's not very thought out. Where I think when we start really designing our life, and as Mandela said, like as we start making those choices, that we're kind of more taking the reins of the ship and steering our direction. That comes from thoughtful choices. If I do this, what's going to happen there? If I do that, what's going to come here? If I show ingratitude, like you're talking about, like I think today's day, probably one of the biggest things that humanity shows is ingratitude, or is, like that kind of snowflakey, like, you're getting me to do something. Oh, I can't stand that. And it's like, whoa, man, like, you get to do this in an environment that, people, years gone, they went and fought to give you this freedom. They went and put their lives on the line to give you this opportunity. They went and create, like when we look at it, and we I think we can choose to have more wonder in the world and go, wow, like I don't have to wash my clothes in the river. Like, like, wow, what did that come from? That came from people getting together and solving a problem. People getting together and working out a solution. And I can it's like that relay race. I can pass the baton on. I've been given the baton. I can now pass it on. And I think that's what I see with this quote.
That's I do feel that sense of community, and it just, for me, it just shows the best that humanity can be when we're all kind of understanding. Like, it doesn't happen organically. We know this from the civil rights movements. I have to be intentional to understand other people's culture and understanding of what that came from. So it's kind of a avoidant way to be like, oh, this stuff will just work itself out. We just need to be nice. No, we have to be intentional on how, because I know for me, what I say, even as small, like you mentioned before, it does make an impact. We may not know it. I could be just nice to a person that I don't know, and that can make a big day for them because they had we don't know. And that, I feel, is a nice model to kind of think about when we go about our day and time. And I do like the fear is not necessarily bad. Obviously there's things that do help us save, like that's kind of our survival mechanism. And but at the same time, when it comes to our bigger dreams, when we talk about our bigger hopes later on, it matures. Solving problems, like you said, I feel is very creative. Problem solving is one of the most human things we could do, is to kind of solve a problem, because it's thinking outside the box per se. And I feel that curiosity lends to that. I love the idea of curiosity. In children, when children are curious, it just feels like a lot of life, a lot of kind of young life, the potential. And it's really, I want to also, as we talk about this, I want to segue and give you an opportunity to kind of share a little bit to those who are listening, a little bit about your story, whatever you feel comfortable in sharing, Kyle. And as well, go ahead. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. So that childlike curiosity, wonderment, I can definitely relate to that, and I think we all can relate to that. And if we need a reminder, we can look at our younger self, maybe pick up some toys from when we were a younger kid, maybe some hobbies, like go down memory lane and just see how we got wrapped up. I was chatting to my partner the other day, and just she was saying how glow in the dark toys used to be like the most incredible things, or like those Heelys, those shoes that would wheel. I said like, or packs of cards or little toys and chocolates. Used to be the most incredible things. And today the kids are interested in different things. But it's amazing how captivated we can be. So a little bit about my story. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and then when I was 2.5, I came to Australia, and I had someone who really guided me in my life. I was very lucky. It was my step grandparents. So my stepfather and my mother brought me to Australia, and I've assimilated into an Australian family. And my grandmother, the first moment she saw me, she looked at this 2.5-year-old kid walking up the stairs. And she had this moment where she said she felt this message from God shoot through her body and say that she was going to be important in my life. And then 14 years later, I found myself out on the streets, nowhere to go, in the middle of the night. And, I skipped a couple of trains, and then went down to my grandparents' place, knocked on their window in the middle of the night, and they opened up the doors, and they opened up their hearts, and they welcomed me into their life. And they really guided me and helped me to work through a lot of trauma. They really, like you said, they held that space. There was they didn't feel the need to trauma bond or tell me their stories, but they just kind of, I would go into their room and they would, I would talk to them and tell them the challenges I had and the issues I was working through. And they guided me through most of my life and really became my own parents. So I think, sharing that story, it's a message that, to keep looking, to keep knocking, to keep out there, because there are good people that I believe you're meant to connect with, grow with, and meant to help you along your path. And both my grandmother passed away last year, my grandfather passed away in 2019. They're both gone, and they're like parents to me, but I still carry them with me. And my grandfather had a great quote. He said, "Look, you don't lose your parents, Kyle. They stay with you. They're in your mannerisms. They're in the way you think. They're in your thoughts. And so, but people will be there for you for a certain part of your journey. Keep looking and keep knocking, because it's out there."
I think a lot of times, it's all perspective when it comes to time and how we look at and how we treat time. I love the Italian proverb. It's kind of funny. I kind of think I can't actually hear Italian say it, but obviously it says, if you can't live longer, live deeper. It just makes me feel, one of pastors that I'm friends with, he always says, go deeper. Always go deeper. Never, like you mentioned, the idea of, I always say this even in my field, it's always okay to have a second opinion. If you don't agree with something, it's okay. I feel, especially as ambiguous as something like mental health can be, because it's different for everyone cross culture and how it kind of onsets. I do encourage that, because it's like that journey can be riddled with a lot of barriers because of value issues, stigma issues of, oh, I'm not enough, oh, this should have happened years ago. But I always kind of remind them, those people that you're worried about thinking that way, they're not helping you right now. And getting to the realization that you don't have to be based on their time. This is this is your journey. They're not going to be there if you really need help. So it's kind of unchaining themselves from this idea that they have to kind of be enough, the enoughness per se of going to be, to ask permission per se to do their own life, which is kind of ridiculous. But as when you're in it, it's harder to see that very clearly. So I do like what I always examine every angle, even if my own self, when I'm reflecting on a situation or something I'm struggling with, Kyle. I don't really just say, okay, this is, I don't concern myself of who is right. I kind of figure out what is right, because the idea is, this is a journey. I'm human. Humans are either most impressive or unimpressive at the same time. It's one of those kind of fun caveats that we are. And I think taking ourselves too seriously or not too seriously can be a kind of a misstep. I do feel there's wonderful things and a lot of things that we can do. I want to ask you anyway. Do you have anything that you want to add to this quote or anything that was said before I go to the next part?
I love that. When I first got into doing photography, when I was doing like a diploma, I had an exhibition coming up, so I had to create a portfolio of work. And one of the things I would do is I'd sit down with people, sit opposite them, chat to them, have a conversation with them, ask them questions, and bit by bit. And I chose to ask my family questions, and it was in like the family home. And just question by question, you ask them questions, and then eventually I felt like you just got a layer, like an onion. You got a deeper layer and a deeper layer. And I felt like eventually there'd be this moment where they would reveal their soul. They'd be deep in thought. They'd be, and that's what I would try and capture. I'd try and take a photograph. And it's interesting, in Australia, the Aboriginals, the Indigenous people of Australia, they don't like you taking photographs of them because they're worried that you're going to capture their soul. And that's one of their beliefs. So it's quite interesting that was kind of I love that quote. I think it's so true. Go deeper, have deeper conversation. Because there's a lot of times where it's surface level problems. How do we fix this? How do we fix that? And a great entrepreneur, a great business leader, a great person who's kind of solving a problem, whatever title that is, they'll ask the next question, and then the next question, and then by the time they ask those next questions, it's what do you really want? What are you really looking for? And then you realize it's not that service level chatter; it's the deeper.
And a lot of times I kind of equate it to, I don't know, the times when I was in trigonometry and math, the idea of the derivative. Like I try to get to the derivative of what I'm feeling. I hated those problems. They're so long, and then you gotta make it small and more digestible. But in relation, a lot of times it's the simple emotions that are the deeper ones. Like, well, this person did. Well, why did that make you feel so bad? And keep going down, and you end up feeling. I just felt like they didn't appreciate me. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt, I was angry. I was this or that. But a lot of times the surface level stuff is a lot of words. The paragraph is ginormous. But at the core of it is, I just feel people don't really hear me, period. I feel unappreciated. I feel a lot of times people ask, and I don't really feel like they ever ask how I'm doing. These things are deeper. These things are more at the core. It's not, why did she didn't call me to, they're asking me last minute to kind of help in church or whatever. I'm like, okay, you're really angry. I get that. But why? That kind of thing. That kind of, if you go a little unfolding a little bit further, you kind of see that. I want to ask you, what habits have you seen or implemented yourself that have been helpful in staying? Well, I kind of said this. I don't know why this is repeated. I guess this is the one I really wanted. What was the biggest lesson that you learned or are learning when it comes to starting over? I think all of us have the point where, there's always an adjustment. I think in life, even if you're doing well, you yourself change. Priorities change. Your friendships change. So what has been a lesson for you to kind of adjust through those changes and learn from them? Any other lessons that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes specifically to starting over, I think there's probably two key tools. One is to be a receiver, so be a learner, be someone who, like that curious child, that wonderment, like, okay, how does this person do it? If it's in a new job, if it's in a new way of thinking, if it's a new way of operating, get around the person that you want to emulate, that you want to kind of move towards. You don't want to be everything of them. You don't want to maybe have some of their skeletons or some of their problems or whatever it is. But maybe they're getting successes in their life that you want to re-emulate in your own life. They're getting overcomings in their life. So you want to get close to them, learn from them, and then kind of, like we're talking about panning, like have like a filtration device where you can kind of go, all right, what do I own? What do I really believe that plays a role in my life, that if I implement what they shared with me will work? what do I kind of not agree with? Let me move that over here. I won't do what they did here, but maybe I'll do what they did there. And I think that's where you're a receiver, you're open, and that's when you're engaged. In kind of playing rugby union. It's like you want your eyes up, your body language up and ready for the impact. You want to kind of be ready for it. So yeah, receive it and then also filter it.
For me, the one thing that comes to mind is just if it takes you 15 minutes, like if you have to take extra steps that you need to know that will make things a little bit easier, don't overgeneralize. This shouldn't happen. You take those 15 minutes, like be intentional. If you know that you learned something, like say, I get stressed or I get so discouraged when I'm around family. Family can be really negative component. Maybe just don't wait till the last minute. I would encourage those people to kind of take those extra steps, whatever it is. Maybe you take time for yourself, put boundaries, find ways to navigate. So you're like, well, this shouldn't happen. The shoulds won't really help you. Find ways to be creative in solving whatever problems they are. So one interesting thing, a lot of times I tell people to journal. I'll tell you it's very simple. Sometimes it's helpful to journal, and the person's like, I write like a blind cat in a bag, or something like that, right? And I'm like, okay. A lot of people don't write anymore with hand. And like, do you type? And he now just journals through Word. He just like kind of writes it typing. He types his journals. So a lot of times that's kind of like thinking outside the box. Because traditionally, you think of journaling is like I have to do it on paper. But if it's a barrier that you feel it's hard for you to get around, but you still want to do it, that's where you kind of think outside the box. Well, I could type and make documents and kind of fold it together, and that itself still does what I want it to do. So I do encourage those. Be creative, be curious, like we say, and find ways that you can accomplish things. There's not only one or two ways. There's usually a third way. So that's the lesson that I've learned, especially trying to start over, because sometimes there's a lot of adjustments when it comes to starting over. There's a lot of relearning. And lastly, I would say be kinder to yourself. This is going to take time. It's okay. And that in itself sometimes de-escalates the pressure that a lot of times society kind of brings on us. There's this one quote from proverb, from Chinese proverb. I like the idea because I have a little musical background. The idea that we all have a song. So sometimes like birds does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. I think all of us have a song, whether you're musically inclined or not. So it doesn't mean that you have to be always productive. You don't have to have that complete answer, but you still have a song to sing per se. So as we kind of wrap up, any final thoughts you want to share, Kyle? It's so wonderful to have you on, by the way.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I love that one. I think it reminds me of another quote with, like, make sure, like, we've all got music within us, and make sure we find that music, like, and we live our life to the beat of our own drum. I think that's really important, and that's where you find your own rhythm, your own routine. You might go into, seek help from someone, or you might go into a new role or something like that, and they'll teach you everything of their way. But like we were saying earlier, you got to filter it, and you got to go, okay, this works, this fits, I like this color, I like this top, I like this, I'm going to try that on for size, but I need to find my own rhythm with it. You need to adopt it in your own way. And whether we were talking about power, whether we're talking about, deciding your own destiny, these things that they're, big dreams, big goals, they're big things to talk about. And we're not saying, hey, this is the prescription, this is how you take it. We're saying these are things that help you to live a more purposeful, passionate and intentional life, and move towards the light and away from the dark. Mm-hmm. Now you need to try it on for size in your own life and see what it means. What does design your destiny mean to you? And so that those are the things. If you're going to implement it, it's got to work into your way.
Yeah. And, one of my close friends once told me that we're always life is always kind of incomplete if you kind of think about it. So if you're okay, if you kind of just stand back a little bit, the idea that life is incomplete can kind of motivate us to kind of be kinder when things aren't incomplete, because it's never really going to be complete. So there's going to be adjustments and turns and under reflections and changes. So it's not bad to have a different opinion. It's not bad to reflect and say, oh, you know what? Maybe I was a little bit wrong there. It's okay, because we're human. We only could kind of work with the context, and we only could get more insight by taking the time to reflect. So I do encourage those as a final thought. You know, when you value your time, you also value your insight. And I would encourage you to kind of take time to learn what that insight is. Kind of know where you want to go. Where does that destiny, where does that objective, what does that mean to you? And a lot of times personalize it, makes it more relatable, makes it more real. One thing I always tell people, especially parents, grandparents who are struggling with their kids or grandkids with mental health, they kind of make it, they rationalize it too much. The point of the reason we're here, why you care about this, because the person's name. Remember their name, because that really humanizes the whole thing. You may not agree with mental health, you may not agree with all these things, but you do want Johnny to feel better. You want Sarah to feel better. So remember that as opposed to everything else. And then you can be a little bit more intentional. I don't like this. It's okay to have second opinions. It's okay to want people to be better. It's okay to have that drive. And I just want to end with that. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to share as we wrap up?
No, I think you're right. I think if we can, we can humanize them and also own it, like you were saying. It's our journey. We need to own it, and we need to bring more importance on it. It needs to be real and true for us. So, no, I think at the end of the day, if you guys wanted to find out a little bit more about me, you can look me up. But I would just challenge you as much as you can to ask that question: how am I deciding my destiny? What is my destiny? Yeah,
and I just want to share with those who are listening. All the links and notes will be in the description. So if you want to find out more about Kyle, it'll be in the notes. So check him out. I want to say thank you so much, Kyle, for coming on, sharing your insight with us. And I also want to share with those who are listening. Remember to stay updated with Revive Ministries through all the various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is the website. I just want to say goodbye. This is goodbye for Revive Ministries Podcast. Leaving his last words of wisdom. It's from Pakistan. It's a Pakistani proverb. I actually like this very much. It says, pride is concerned with who is right, while humility is concerned with what is right. Thank you.
Oof. Love it. Thank you, mate. Thanks, brother.
No problem.